welcome to Spoiler Talk for Wanderers. So first of all, thank you for being a valued patron. We appreciate you oh so much. Don't forget to check out the Matthew McBride interview. If you're listening to this, you should have already listened to the Matthew McBride interview available here on Patreon somewhere. Where do you like to go first, my friend? Because I feel like there is so much to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this because I was kind of contextualizing things to myself, and there's so much to talk about. I think just starting out with the sleepwalker phenomenon, it was early on that I decided to myself, before it was ever revealed, that this was something that was not like a pathogen or some sort of disease or something, like something from nature. I decided early on there is some sort of programming to what's happening.
I'm going to agree with you on that. I mean, not, of course, I'm not agreeing that you thought that. I'm agreeing that I also thought that.
Yeah.
But there's so much. I don't want to be overly analytical of a fantasy book. But you know what I mean? Because that's what it is. Bottom line is it's fantasy, right? Like some of it's rooted in reality. Like, yes, we have nano machines that eventually be able to do things. I was really kind of put off by the fact, though, that the nano machines can make someone's skin impenetrable. Like, I got the rest of the stuff. I got that if the nano machines could not move in the direction which they're supposed to move, they would, vibrate heavily, heat up, and explode. Like, I had no particular issue with that. Mm-hmm. I was finding the rest of it a little bit of a stretch. The being taser proof or being needle proof, a little bit of a stretch. And I was trying not to. I'm like, all right, look, I'm reading a fucking book about people who, can walk for, months, literally months without stopping and stuff. And this is what I'm getting hung up on. So I don't know that we'll ever have that technology. I don't know if you thought anything about some of the little, like
the unbelievable things.
Like simple hydration. Like, I don't know that the little nano machines can keep your muscles hydrated enough to keep them moving for months. You know what I mean? There were some things that I got hung up on a little bit there that took away a little bit from the story, but I was trying. I'm like, this is a fantasy story. This is kind of one of those things, like, you don't want to start having these questions when you're reading a werewolf novel either. The logistics of it. But this presented itself in a very science-y way, and that's, I think, where I was having a struggle. If you told me we're reading a book about a fucking witch that's fighting a vampire clan, it's not presenting itself in a realistic way.
Yeah.
So I have less of a challenge, I guess, with that.
Well, to a degree, and this is I am admitting up front, this is a stretch. But I think that there are documented cases of people enduring extremes based entirely just on conditioning their body or focusing or those types of things. Like, you got the guy that can be in, like super, super cold water for like hours, or like sitting out in the Arctic in like with no clothes on, but not feeling cold because they've conditioned their body in a certain way, or they have mental control over their physical body, that they can overcome some of the discomforts and stuff. So, like, I think if you took that to an extreme, I don't know about like having skin that can't be pierced by things, but yeah, there's like the weird, those kind of extremes of the world that could be used as a way to kind of bridge the gap to make it less unbelievable. Possibly.
Maybe. Maybe. I do think so once the white mask, for anybody who's listening has read this, white mask is the flu. So Black Swan, the AI, infected people with nano machines so that some people will be alive because they'll survive white mask, which is this, I don't know what you call it, flu type plague that's passed, airborne, that's going to kill off 99% of the population. I was pretty sure once White Mask was uncovered that Black Swan had something to do with it. I don't know that I was thinking Black Swan infected people with it, which is ultimately the result of it. But I was pretty sure the Black Swan was somehow kind of partially responsible for what was going on.
Yes, I'm going to agree that that's what you were pretty sure of. I'm also going to agree that I was on the same boat. And it's mostly because it's revealed pretty early on. And there was probably like 2 or 3 different times throughout the book where like I had as close to the equivalent of an audible gasp kind of response to things as I can get. But so when it's revealed that through quantum entanglement, the current day Black Swan was talking to the future Black Swan, I was like, all right, if the Black Swan from the future is telling the current Black Swan what's going on, and this thing is happening no matter what, it's happening because the fucking computer wants it to, because otherwise it would just figure out a different way to stop it from happening altogether.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I tried so hard. I really did to not. And you know, overall, you know, what do I think of the story? I think the overall story, I have some issues, but the overall story was pretty good and kept me fairly engaged and stuff. But like, and again, I have no idea how AI in nano robots inside your body work, because let's face it, fucking nobody does. But like the weird shared space that they all inhabit in, how do you say the in Colorado, Uwe?
I think it's just Ure, right?
Ure, yeah, whatever. You know, that they're inhabiting this shared space and stuff it felt a little forced to me. Now, that being said, how do they get away from the marauding militia, right? That Arab guy, I thought that was fucking brilliant. That he goes and then they use the nano machines to infect. Like, I really thought that was really, really good stuff. Again, a little sketchy on the getting there. You know, so before I go on, another issue, and maybe you have thoughts on this and something I didn't think about. We know that Nessie was infected by opening the vial, right? Which had the nano machines in it that went ahead and, you know, jumped in her body, right?
Yep.
The problem I was having with that was people are showing up every, 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is, kind of religiously. Like, were they all just getting packages at all hours of the night? And how do you know what I mean? Like, how were the other people getting infected? Because it didn't seem to me that she was carrying all of the nano machines and some, you know what I mean? I was having some issues on how everybody else was getting roped in too, as I was analyzing. Most of this came to me from trying to analyze. I'm like, all right, so what's happening? Why are there people coming? They're walking across states and people continue to show up. So before you get the information on the nano swarm, I'm trying to figure out, well, what could cause this to happen? So you go to like a supernatural element, right? When you find out it's nano machines, I was having some trouble with the distribution system being consistent enough to continue to bring people in on a regular basis. And like I said, just bear with me here. It's really because the book is kind of presented in a science-y kind of way, even if it's science we don't understand. Like I said, if it's supernatural and a witch cast a curse that every 3 hours a random person would join the flock, I'd be like, okay, because that's what witches can do. But kind of in that further examination, and mostly as I'm trying to figure it out, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't a little better explanation there.
All right, I'm going to just lay out a scenario.
Yes.
We'll see how you feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
I am an all-knowing fucking robot, right? And I've been planning all this shit.
Seems that way sometimes, but go on. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I see. All right. I've been planning all this shit for quite a while. It's obvious, right? It takes a long time for all the things to come together that have come together in this plan. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my people based on the criteria I need. I need a diversity of ethnicities. I need a diversity of genders. I need a relatively healthy group of people, and I need them to be intelligent. So the first thing I have to do is I have to find the people. So they're spread out across the country. How do I collect them? All right, the walking thing, whatever. I don't know if that's what I would choose, or like have them kind of going on this like kind of tour of the country, whatever. That's what it chose to do. But it basically had tons of time to find ways specific to the behaviors of the people that it was collecting to get the nano machines to them. So like, I don't think it's necessarily like everybody received a vial and the same thing happened. The delivery system could have been unique to the individual based on like the way that they work. So like if it's a doctor, you know, something happens at a hospital, like where they have like medicine they take or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like it could qualify the delivery method of these machines differently based on the individual over the course of however long it takes, and then just activate them as the people are walking by.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking about timed activation as a potential thing.
Yeah.
I'm really thinking about the grand tour. All right, I don't want to get more bogged down in the details of this. Marcy. So we talked a little bit about Marcy on the podcast. What's your take on Marcy?
I mean, I just like, aside from the fact that I love the character, if we're talking about you're having trouble believing the science of it, like the titanium in her head made her like an antenna, like they were saying, and she just perceived things differently, didn't know what she was perceiving. As far as like the miracle cure of her problems, I would say that like they even kind of vaguely explained it as the way that the plate is positioned by her optical, you know, nerve, or optic nerve or whatever was causing pain, that somehow being near the frequency vibration of these machines relieved. So I'm happy with it. I think it's fine. And I think it was a cool way to kind of get like a true believer on the side of the flock, even if it was total nonsense and it could be easily explained away.
I was hoping for something more like this, that we find out that Marcy was a little bit of a mistake, that she actually had nano machines, but her ability to continue to control like her own, you know what I mean, was because of the metal plate. I was going a different direction because she's healthier. She seems to be very healthy when she's around them, you know, that right. kind of thing. Which again, when she's farther away from them, she's still much better off than she was, but that does diminish a little bit. So through the whole thing, I was thinking, well, the flock grows stronger as it continues to move, you know, so, but because she had very strong after that and stuff. So I was kind of hoping for a Black Swan explanation of, yeah, sometimes you fuck up. Like, she was a perfect candidate because she was a good person. She was good at what she did. She seemed like she was pretty intelligent. And man, I didn't figure in that fucking plate. Is a, you know, that's kind of where I was hoping it was. I also thought Marcy was an interesting character. You know, I didn't dislike her. I just that's one of those things that I if I were reading this book as a first reader, I'd be like, hey man, why don't you tie this into Black Swan just making a mistake? You can give Black Swan a couple cool lines on Nobody's Perfect. You know what I mean?
Or like or Marcy even being like a failed trial run or something like that.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, speaking of failed trial runs, here's some characters I don't understand. I want to go back and I want to talk about the rock star. I really like Peter Corley. But in thinking about this whole thing, how I felt he should have been a bigger character, like I really realized that he had almost nothing to do with the actual story. Like he plays a song and that gets the military to back off. And then he accidentally hits... what's his name? Stover with a car, right?
Yep.
Other than that, he was really just there for color. He was there for a couple of laughs.
Yeah.
And he didn't figure it, and I liked the character. It just occurred to me that as much as I liked him, I'm going a different route. Would the book have been less enjoyable? I think so, because he was good for a chuckle, and he was kind of an interesting guy, and getting that old washed up, well, not washed up, but, you know, that old kind of dated rock star look at things was cool. I just don't think it was central to the story at all. Like, when I really think about it, I'm like, would I have thought anything different about the plot? No, because he didn't figure into the plot, like, at all.
I mean, it's not in the beginning of the book, or even only, you know, maybe more toward the end, the anecdotal murder of, you know, the bad guy aside. I think I think so like zooming out a little bit with a story like this, there is a massive, you know, suspension of disbelief, obviously. But there also has to be the acknowledgement that like nothing like this has ever happened, so we don't know who would do what or why, and so we kind of just have to take this as a, well, this could be, this could be how things go down, and so that's, I guess, taking the good with the bad. All of these characters are just like a what if scenario for the end of the world, and so I don't think that, I think that having kind of the innocuous characters like Pete Corley and his lover add realism, in as much as like people are just going to get thrown together kind of willy-nilly in a situation where the world's falling apart.
All right. What else do you have?
I didn't expect like man rape to be a part of this story. So
yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, unless you're reading a prison book, I don't think you ever really expect man rape to be a thing. Yeah.
So there was like moments of there was moments of some serious violence that and there's these stories that are epic and sprawling like this one is, there's always going to be that stuff that makes you uncomfortable, and I could have done without some of the torture and the murder and like the extremism and stuff like that, just because it's not something, I just find it distasteful. But again, like I was saying, in a situation where the world's falling apart, people are going to act the way they're going to act, and so the pastor getting raped to me was an extreme moment. Although I think him just straight up murdering people is far more extreme than him getting raped. Being like the timid, ineffectual dude for most of the story. Like when he murders that first person, I was like, whoa, where did this come from?
He's that District 9 character. We were just talking about him in another podcast recently, right? Like he starts off and he's kind of getting pushed around by people, and by the end he's the fucking Terminator.
Yeah, he Terminated up pretty quick.
So while we're on that subject, and I can't talk about this on the pod. I've tried to think of a way, but so I'll address it here for the few Patreons and stuff. The thing I didn't like about this, and this is where I think, and you will likely disagree with me, this is where I think this story could have been better. So we've laid it all out. We've got all the good guys, right? And then we introduce the bad guys, and the bad guys are immediately all white supremacists. Like more swastika tattoos in this book than in like that TV show Oz or whatever, which I never watched, but like a prison show, right? I thought it just would have, like, that's low hanging fruit. I thought it would have been more interesting to have maybe an opposition to sleepwalkers, because let's face it, man, that's some pretty scary shit, right? So I don't know what side of pro or anti sleepwalker I would be if sleepwalkers occurred today. Wouldn't it have been more interesting to have maybe a more sympathetic opposition? Like, I know we still have to get to a point where they're going to go and kill the sleepwalkers and stuff like that, but literally making Hitler the head of the guy who wants to kill the sleepwalkers seemed like really low-hanging fruit to me. And I would have been far more impressed if we found a more sympathetic antagonist. So you could actually ask yourself the question. So if you put yourself in this book, you're either a white supremacist or you support the sleepwalkers. Those are the only two options as you read this book, right? What if you're a reasonable human being that thinks the sleepwalkers are really a threat to you, your family, and you know, the world at large? Like, I thought that might have been more interesting, and instead I feel like Chuck Wettenfer, the easy one. Who likes a Nazi? So we'll make the Nazis the bad guys.
I mean, to be fair, those are the people who are absolutely the most likely to actually do what they did.
Yes, I think you're right. I just think it would have made for a more... well, I think it would, but that's what I'm saying. That's low-hanging fruit. It would have been far more compelling to introduce, you know, whatever, some more reasonable, maybe sympathetic people as the opposition. I mean, we really made it. We turned it into a very easy good versus evil. There's no easier way to do that. And what if we would have taken a little more challenging way? I mean, you had 800 pages to do it in. So it's not like we had to get this out there quick and make it, real simple. These are the bad guys, and right away. Like you take the pastor, for example. Like the pastor starts off as a guy, you're like, oh, kind of a wimpy guy. He gets pushed into this. He becomes, he turns his character around towards the end. So you have a person who's not necessarily evil incarnate who winds up doing some bad things. And then, yes, somewhat, I guess, maybe redeems himself depending on how big a part you think he played in the extremism of pushing people towards one side of this, one side of the issue. So I didn't think you would agree with me. I just wanted to put out there that I thought that there was a more interesting way to do this, and that Wendig chose not to.
Well, I was anticipating this entire argument from you, and I got my gotcha moment. So, first of all, I would love to hear more detailed, like what you think a more nuanced bad guy would be, because obviously you have thoughts about that, like maybe off air or whatever. But here's my thought: what I called Redneck Apocalypse was never the bad guy at all. Black Swan was the bad guy. And that became very obvious at the end of the book. So everything happened because of the machinations of Black Swan, which means every character in this book that wasn't Black Swan was a pawn in what it was planning to do. So everybody was a victim of the plan of Black Swan. So these guys, Ozark Stover, he sucked. But just as much a victim as Benji and the Walkers and like all the shepherds and stuff.
So I'll tell you, that's a very, very interesting perspective. My pushback for that, and I didn't think about it until you said it, is, well, why the fuck didn't I think Black Swan was the bad guy? And it occurred to me that while you were talking, as I asked myself that question, I said, oh, because he did what he did to save the planet from global warming. I don't even know that Chuck Wendig thinks that Black Swan was the bad guy in this book.
No, absolutely he does. I guarantee it.
Okay.
Because at the very end of the book, it's the fact that Black Swan basically, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not blackmail. It's extorts Shayna into being basically the new Virgin Mary in this weird Black Swan cult.
Yeah.
Like, that establishes Black Swan as not being altruistic or even somehow benevolent. This is a thing that destroyed almost everything without the benefit of humanity in mind.
Which is what we're always told the AI is going to do, not to change the subject. But that's the big AI argument. When I said this is the AI we're always warned about, is always that it'll serve man to the point where it decides that, it has to kill man to serve man, essentially. If that makes sense.
Right. And
yeah.
And to be honest, I think that it was more serving the betterment of the overall ecology or environment than it was specifically humanity.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, Black Swan was the bad guy all along. Everybody was a victim of the plot to kind of restore the balance to nature, which is, it's actually kind of funny that something completely unnatural did everything it did to restore the balance to nature.
Yeah. See, man, you got to turn that Siri shit off on your phone, dude.
You know what? I'm one of those guys. I was talking to someone at work the other day, and it was like one of those, like, and if your life depended on it, something dumb like, could you do 5 push-ups or something like that? And my thought went to, like, I've had a good run, man. Like, I'm all about things just shutting down eventually, because, like, everything is miserable. I'm Black Swan.
You're Black Swan. That's what I said earlier, all-knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing, too, because, again, not to go too far into it, I'll probably touch on it in my thing, it was just way too much political checkboxing. Box checking? Box checking makes more sense than checkboxing. I think Chuck Wendig, it felt like he had a little list things he wanted to touch on: healthcare costs, environment, racism, overt and not, and like through the book, it felt very politically preachy, which is fine for the majority of people, I guess, according to the Amazon reviews. Rob clued me in on where I fell on this opinion in the Amazon reviews, and I'm in the bottom, like 20% or whatever it is. I like my politics as much as the next person, but I like them on, TV in debates. I actually told Rob I had to break off from the Democratic debates to do this podcast, so now I have to YouTube like the rest of it later tonight. I like it very separate from my fiction for the most part, and I get it. They're very important political fiction books. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair comes to mind. Probably Brave New World and Fahrenheit 451. This is none of those. So the politics and the really preachy politics throughout the course of it ground on me at times. I probably would have. It didn't take away. It didn't change any of the story. Like I said, I already addressed the things that I didn't like about the story, or things I definitely would have done differently if it were me, or would have suggested to someone smarter than me that's writing a book. But that stuff really kind of it missed its mark with me and was actually kind of distracting in some ways.
But here's the most important thing: Miriam Black makes an appearance.
Miriam Black does make an appearance. That I thought you'd bring up on like the regular podcast, because I don't think that's spoilery at all. Of course, Rob had to catch that reference, and although the second he said it, I knew the part. I remember reading the line, and it still moved right past me.
Yeah, I thought it was. I even went so far because we're assuming people either don't care or have read the book, as to go into the book Vultures to see if I could kind of find if like the name of the diner that is mentioned in Wanderers actually is mentioned, and I couldn't find it, and I don't think it is, but I took it as being the place, either a place along the way, or the place where Miriam went when she was looking for that guy, the serial killer, and then she got like abducted. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I took it as that place, but I couldn't find. He didn't go. I don't think he went deep enough to like make that solid, tangible of a connection. He just did the.
They were in Arizona at the time, weren't they?
No, this is the Mojave Desert.
Okay. I was trying to remember, because I know a lot of the one book took place in Arizona. The one you're talking about, I think.
Geographically, part of it took place, because a lot of it took place in L.A., and there was stuff that happened in the Mojave, like, as well.
All right.
So
it's a very cute crossover if you're smart enough to catch it, which I was not. So
a nice little Easter egg for you there.
Yep. Very, very cool. Anything else before we go back and do our wrap-ups?
No, I think that my big thing was pointing out that Black Swan was the bad guy all along. That was my like coup de grace, and so I feel good that I got to explore that thought with you.
I'm glad that we talked about it too, because I'm still on the fence on that whole thing. Like I'm not sure. Like I said, I still don't know that. That there aren't people, and if it's not Chuck Wendig, there aren't people who'd read it that would think, like, when you said it, I was like, what do you mean he's the bad guy? I'm like, he did it all in defense of the earth. So I don't know, but I'm glad we talked about it. It did bring a pretty interesting, definitely an interesting spin on the whole book.
All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for our spoiler talk. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon. We're going to head back over and do our wrap-ups, and I think we've got plenty of books in the very near future, so you'll be getting much more spoiler talk.